when I was about 10 years old. As I aged, my psoriasis went all over my body. The skin would be so tight on my palms that I couldn't open my hands. I had to make an effort to explore all of my options for treatment. If I hadn't taken the steps to start seeking out the right treatment for myself, then it would have ultimately ruled my life.
Welcome to The Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. The skin is the body's largest organ. It helps protect your nerves, tissue, and muscles. The skin is also the only organ you can see. When your skin is affected by a serious disease, as was the case for the people you'll meet in a moment, the consequences can not only be physically dangerous, they can be psychologically devastating. This is the story of 3 individuals who, according to conventional doctors, would never enjoy a blemish-free day. But when one of them found an alternative cure that proved those doctors wrong, all 3 of their lives changed forever.
I was told by the doctors that they did not know the cause of psoriasis. People would say that I should use my hands in scary movies and horror movies.
At times I had this terrible itch. I would constantly scratch. My body felt like it was on fire.
It just itches so bad that you don't sleep. There was literally 4 months or so where I was slowly going crazy there, not sleeping, but just kind of thinking this is life.
I remember when I was in 8th grade or so, and I was on a basketball team, my hand split open in the middle of the game, dripping blood on the basketball court. I remembered a girl making fun of me. My dad and my brother were there, and they were put into a terrible position. I can still remember how my dad was after that game. I knew that he was really struggling with either trying to be comforting or to not say anything. Probably the part that's been harder to see is when it impacts others negatively.
It just got to that point where I couldn't really have a daily life anymore.
As the illness progressed, my depression got deeper and deeper. I had no control whatsoever. I had one time contemplated an avenue of ending.
Growing up in Texas, Deirdre was an athletic child who loved playing outside with friends. Her psoriasis first surfaced during one of the most impressionable times of life. She had just started junior high. The symptoms quickly undermined her self-confidence.
It was very obvious that Deirdre did not have a normal childhood.
I first noticed psoriasis when I was about 10 years old. I thought that it was some kind of athlete's foot or something because I was always playing sports as a kid. So I went to a dermatologist, and then they diagnosed it as being psoriasis. But it didn't become a body-wide issue until I was about 13.
Psoriasis causes a buildup of dry skin cells that can look like fish scales. Some doctors believe it's an autoimmune disease. Others blame a malfunctioning epidermis.
I went from having just some spots on my foot and probably around my ankle to it becoming just everywhere on my body. Always trying to find ways to hide it. I remember wearing jackets and I would cover up my hands. I'd walk around with my hands completely covered, and then as I would sit at a table to write, I would hold my pencil inside the jacket. At that time, there was a treatment center at the Children's Hospital at Parkland Hospital outside of Dallas called a Geckerman treatment. And you go in and they cover your entire body in coal tar. So when people talk about a tar baby, I know what that is because I've been a tar baby before.
Specifically with the Geckerman regimen, the patient is coated with coal tar mixed with ointment once or twice a day. The tar is then removed and the subject is exposed to UVB, the safer version of ultraviolet light. Some dermatologists question the use of coal tar, but nonetheless, the treatment does slow down the growth of skin cells and, for a short time, the inflammation. Considering how much time the regimen takes, Deirdre wasn't certain that the payoff was worth it.
It did clear my skin. The first time I was in the hospital, both times were for 3 weeks to a month. And the first time I got improvements more quickly, and I remember that both times I had clearance for about a month, but you know, to spend a whole month in the hospital and then to just get a month of clearance is not that great.
It was not really making any improvement with all that they were doing, you know, the best of everything. Didn't seem to be anything that was going to help her give her total relief and be permanent.
We know a lot about what goes on in a psoriasis lesion on a microscopic or cellular level, but we really don't know what the actual cause is.
Deirdre treated her psoriasis with prescription creams and medication, but the disease kept adjusting itself. Over time, larger and larger doses were needed, and her psoriasis didn't seem like it would ever get better. In fact, her situation got worse.
As I aged, my psoriasis went from being all over my body to isolating itself around my joint areas.
Psoriasis can potentially be very debilitating. Some patients with psoriasis will have joint manifestations where their joints are involved and they suffer from psoriatic arthritis.
At the age of 39, it got so bad that it was becoming disabling. The skin would be so tight on my palms that I couldn't open my hands. I couldn't even get my hand around my steering wheel. I had a real sense of desperation about my disease.
She said, you know what, I am tired of doctors. I'm tired of doctors making me medicated to where I'm not seeing results and I'm not feeling like myself.
I knew that the next step in my treatment plan was methotrexate, which is a chemotherapy drug that was originally developed for cancer. Having always been conscientious about negative side effects that were certainly nothing compared to the side effects associated with taking chemotherapy indefinitely, I knew that I had to do something differently and to find some other way of managing my disease.
Facing the possibility of chemotherapy treatments for the rest of her life, Deirdre decided something had to change. The chemo was not only an unreliable form of treatment, it could possibly kill her. She needed an entirely new approach to fighting the disease.
When I first heard that chemotherapy was the next step for Deirdre's psoriasis, or at least getting her some relief from it, I was shocked.
She was definitely depressed. I could see that.
That's when she decided, no thank you, and there has to be another way.
I had to at least make an effort to explore all of my options for treatment.
Deirdre is an information junkie like me, so her finding this information was quite a journey for her.
At some level, she was listening to something inside that said there's got to be something else, and I'm going to give it my best to find out what it is.
The remedies suggested by doctors hadn't worked. The last resort option of chemotherapy was nearly unthinkable. Deirdre had to take matters into her own hands.
I went to Google and I started searching with the word psoriasis, and I started looking for words that would come up over and over and over again. And what I kept seeing was diet. What struck me particularly strongly was the fact that I'd spent almost 15 years as a registered dietitian, and yet I was never told how food could be my own medicine, how I might apply this to help myself.
It came to her, this must be the answer. There must be a way to treat my body naturally.
If you avoid the foods that are more likely to produce inflammation in the skin, and you substitute them or increase your food intake with items that are more likely to reduce inflammation. This is how I believe that you're seeing an effect on the skin from diet.
What I kept seeing come out of the particular dietary recommendations was an emphasis on a plant-based diet that's built around whole foods. And the more I delved into it, the more I could see that the dietary suggestions were ones for which there were no negative side effects.
Almost all of Deirdre's meals had to be rethought. As a diet professional, she had always tried to eat healthy food. She just hadn't been eating the right food for her condition.
I was giving up all meats. I was giving up all cheeses. I was giving up all alcohol. I was giving up white flour. I was giving up white sugar.
When I first met Deirdre, she was not on any sort of healthy regimen. She was healthy, but it wasn't a regimen like we see her now. I wouldn't say it was a fast food world for her by any means, but it was probably not as healthy as it could have been for. None of us have been that healthy compared to what she is now.
I started eating sweet potatoes and turnips and beets and bok choy and watercress and arugula, things that I'd never even heard of before I started incorporating into my diet.
Deirdre learned how to be creative with her new regimen. Her background helped, but even she never imagined some of the dishes she would put together.
For snacks, fruits and dates. I'll get raw chocolate and just stir it into raw honey. Smoothies with tofu with blueberries or a blueberry mix. I might put some raw chocolate in there. I might put some almond butter in there. I knew that I was never going to be someone that would take a fundamentalist approach to diet, that I was never going to be a vegan, that I was never going to give up white sugar totally, that I was never going to give up alcohol totally. That these things were all going to stay in my life on some level.
Deirdre decided that if she didn't see any improvement after 6 months, she would reconsider the possibility of chemotherapy treatments. Things did not start out well.
Like a lot of people that embark upon a more naturopathic type of healing, I too experienced that my symptoms worsened before they got better. I had the worst phase of psoriasis I ever had in my entire life, with itching that would keep me awake all night. The skin around my ankles was so tight I couldn't sleep with them on my bed. I'd have to sleep with them off at the side of the bed. And the heat coming out of my hands was so great that I could have my hand a foot away from my face and I could still feel the heat on my face coming just from my hand. That terrible phase was about 6 weeks long, and then I came out of it one day and it was kind of like the parting of the Red Sea. All of a sudden, my psoriasis just really started to clear, and that was 4 years ago, and since then I haven't had to spend any money on prescription medications for psoriasis. Not only did I avoid the chemotherapy, but I've also avoided all of the steroidal treatments.
Psoriasis had humiliated Deirdre during her teenage years. It nearly crippled her as an adult. Now that she had found a way to keep the disease at bay, she wanted to reach out to others with skin disorders who were suffering as she had.
I think Deirdre felt that she had something to offer psoriasis patients that was different than what other people were offering psoriasis patients.
I don't know anyone that is as excited about helping people as Deirdre.
I first met Dr. Dubois when I was traveling with a local drug rep here in Austin to let dermatologists in Austin know about the psoriasis support group that I had founded here so that they could tell their patients about our support group.
I automatically assumed when I saw her with the pharmaceutical representative that she was on this drug that the representative was detailing. So I turned to her and asked her, "Oh, are you on this medication?" And she said, "No, I control my psoriasis with diet." And that just intrigued me.
She knows what can happen when a person begins to eat properly because she's seen it herself.
We do have a lot of evidence, even in the medical literature, that diet may affect psoriasis in some patients.
Food can be one version of medicine, not only for psoriasis, but for all different kinds of chronic inflammatory skin diseases.
To have someone like Deirdre, who has the traditional medical background as a registered dietitian, has been very helpful for a lot of my patients.
Deirdre Earle's triumph over the pain and humiliation caused by her psoriasis empowered the Texas dietitian. She wanted to share her victory with others who suffered similar afflictions. Deirdre met Shannon Livengood, a young woman tormented by severe eczema, and a man named Prax Flores, whose own skin problems had left him in a terrible emotional state. Their stories were familiar.
I had it all here, on my chin, on my face, right here on my arms, behind my armpits and shoulders. People just wonder what's going on with you. I mean, I would walk around and jokingly tell people I'm a freak, because that's kind of what it felt like. You know, I mean, I would just go home sometimes and just cry.
Unlike Shannon and Deirdre, whose skin diseases started when they were young, Prax's started when he was an adult. Needless to say, it was a tough adjustment.
It started on my hands, and then slowly it started moving up onto my arms. I was not paying much attention. Then all of a sudden, overnight, it just flared up. It just went out of control. I was in a state of depression. My depression got deeper and deeper.
I said, honey, I said, we will find help. I said, we'll do something. He says, no, we're not. He says, I'm not ever going to get well. And so at this point, I said, I've got to do something. What I did not know.
I'd seen several doctors, went to allergists and just all kinds of doctors, but I came to Dr. Dubois and needed some help with my eczema. And at the same time was trying to combat that not only with modern medicine, but I wanted to try some kind of a holistic or more of a natural approach. So when I was here, I asked her if she knew of anybody that I could talk to, and she had a card for Deirdre.
Because of her social life, the idea of giving up alcohol and giving up dairy and some other things were going to be really hard for her. But I could tell that she was motivated because, like me, she had been through years and years or decades worth of trying different types of prescription medications without long-term results.
The symptoms hit Prax particularly hard, and he sunk into a serious depression. His wife, Dora, tried desperately to find her husband help. Finally, she found Deirdre.
I leave a message on the answer machine, and within minutes, Deirdre is calling me. And we were on the phone 2 hours.
His doctor had told him that there wasn't anything left to do. He'd already tried a couple of rounds of methotrexate, the chemotherapy, and hadn't gotten results. That's when I said, well, would you consider changing your diet?
My diet was terrible before this.
He would not have like maybe 1 tortilla. He would have like 8 tortillas. He would have 6 slices of bacon, chocolate cookies and what have you, and he would just not eat one, but many of them.
Adhering to a strict diet is more than simply eating different foods. It's a lifestyle change. Emotionally, it was harder for Shannon to adjust than it was for Prax.
I won't lie, it was extremely difficult. I was depressed. I was crying. My boss told me one day on like day 3, he was like, do you need to go home?
It was a big change. I started strictly vegetables, romaine lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower for approximately 2 weeks.
It took him a while, too, before he started experiencing benefits, and even as he was experiencing benefits, I think he was so depressed that he was not seeing his improvements yet, so I had him start taking pictures.
I remember, too, Deirdre was such a help because she just kept saying, because I kept asking, how long is this going to take? And she just kept telling me, stick with it. Do 6 months. You're going to see results in 6 months. And it took me 5 months.
I would run into her. I ran into her a couple of times at the farmer's market. Her energy level was really different. Her outlook was very different. She wasn't having to deal with the itching anymore. And then as her face and her neck started to clear, I just saw a very different person.
We took pictures for about 6 months, and it was just, we just saw the transformation.
My son was excited, and he says, Dad, you're healing. And we went back to my office, looked at the computer, and I saw a change. I said, my God. I said, this is fantastic. I cannot believe this.
That was a very strong moment for him.
My cholesterol dropped. My whole outlook in life has changed tremendously.
Prax will ask me, how did you do it? And I said, you know what, honey? What gave me the energy was seeing you heal.
To see him now, he's lost 50 pounds, and he glows, his skin is beautiful, whereas before it was very, it was life-threatening.
The diet developed by Deirdre Earls has not only helped those with chronic skin disorders, it has proved beneficial to people who suffer from all kinds of ailments.
What's different about what I do, both in my own life and in teaching others and in my book, is that I try to help people realize that they can do this within the context of a really busy lifestyle where they don't have to spend a lot of time preparing food. They don't have to spend a lot of time taking cooking classes. They don't have to limit themselves to a handful of restaurants.
It'd be one thing to do the research, change your lifestyle, see the results, and go, okay, I did it, I feel better. But then to push that forward and say, I know other people need this too, this is my calling.
It was so helpful with Deirdre to have somebody who said, look, I've done it too. Like, I'm not sitting here just telling you what I think you should do. I've done it, look at me. And it's inspiring.
It takes a very special patient to embrace this healing diet. It takes a lot of self-control and a lot of resistance. We have a lot of temptations out there that will interfere with adhering to the diet.
Maybe this disease has kind of been a blessing in disguise, and that I've always insisted on looking for some kind of positive somewhere instead of emphasizing and focusing on the negatives.
And the very motivated patient who wants to get well and wants to make a major change in his or her life, it can produce pretty profound results.
So I want to encourage people to recognize that even when they feel out of control with their condition, we always have control of how we respond to it.
Doctors couldn't tell Deirdre, Shannon, or Prax how to cure their debilitating skin disorders. The itching and burning was not only distressing and infuriating, but the painful flare-ups were constant reminders of their outward appearance. And while the creams and ointments offered little help, it was finally the threat of chemotherapy that sent Deirdre looking for an alternative solution. Fortunately, for all of them, she found deliverance in her dietary choices, and each of them was able to heal.